your voice to your advantage? Speaking is the form we most commonly use to communicate with one another. And the human voice is a simple machine, which can be broken down into 4 parts. The breath, the diaphragm, which regulates how fast the air comes through, the vocal cords, which actually vibrate, and the resonating space in the mouth. So how can you use this machine to your advantage? Personally, I've always been an auditory creature. When I was a kid, I would sing myself to sleep, the vibrations of my own tiny voice lulling me into oblivion while the demons of reality gnawed at my ankles. Sound, as a physical and artistic concept, has been the purpose of my life's work. Professionally, I've been a lot of things. An opera singer, a master speaker coach, a violinist, and even for a wonderful decade in there, a trapeze artist. That last one didn't make a lot of noise, but I found ways to make it noisy. As a predominantly classical musician, I spent a lot of my life singing other people's music, making other people's art sound beautiful. And while I enjoyed that to a certain extent, something was always missing. And then March 2020 happened. And for the first time in a long time, I was able to slow down and just be with the sounds inside of me. And I wrote a lot. I wrote an entire one-woman show called Sympathetic Resonance, which explores the concept of sound through poetry, physics, and opera. And it was in my research for that show that I taught myself a bit about the physics of sound and began to fully understand the power of the invisible waves that control so much of our lives. Throughout that whole time, that wonderful Mahatma Gandhi quote, "Be the change you wish to see in the world," kept rattling around inside my head. And then one day it hit me like a ton of bricks. I want to make the sound I wish to hear in the world. See, we all have a soundtrack that goes through our lives, no matter where we are, whether it's our 6th Zoom call of the day or on the phone with a friend or singing in a choir after work. Our voice creates that soundtrack. But we don't get a fancy Netflix budget that underscores everything and guides our listeners' emotional center to where we want them to go. No, all we get is this simple 4-part machine called the human voice. And our voice creates all this sound. And all this sound comes out of you. The actual physical wave of sound sparks in your throat when air passes through, and the vibration of your vocal cords travels out of your body into the air through the space, displacing the molecules around it, even through a microphone. And those sound waves then land in your listener's ear, and their ear, the cilia inside of their ear, dance and move and raise to attention like the hairs on your arm when a lover kisses your neck, and that specific movement gets decoded in their brain. But what I've found over my years working with clients is that people have absolutely no idea how their voices work or how to harness the power of their voices to make that sound they wish to hear and create the beautiful soundtracks of their lives. See, we spend an enormous amount of time in our lives focused on what we're going to say. We even spend an enormous amount of time focused on why we say what we say. But yet, we spend almost no time focused on how we say what we say. It makes sense when you think about it. We all have a voice, we all can speak, but if I tell my son, "I'm not mad," he doesn't believe me, because my tone is betraying the hard truth underneath my words. Maybe I really am just frustrated or annoyed, but he hears mad. It stands to reason then that all professions who have to talk a lot or be in front of a crowd or communicate messages would get voice training, right? Surely MBA programs must have whole courses on how to use this simple 4-part machine to your advantage. Think about professions that rely on their voices: lawyers, news anchors, salespeople, trainers. In their formal education, none of these professions consistently receive public speaking education as a matter of necessity. Many MBA programs offer improv comedy night or after-school comedy clubs to help their students improve their oration skills. And yet, despite the history of elocution and rhetoric training dating back to the ancient Greeks, these courses are not consistently offered. Programs focus on content. Can we fix the strain in this curve, engineers? Can we sell this product, marketers? Can we make our clients more money, financial planners? Learning subjects and gaining mastery in them is crucially important, don't get me wrong. But what good does having the cure for cancer do if you don't have the tools to communicate it effectively? A few months ago, I had the pleasure to work with Joanne, a food scientist who was working in a very real way to eliminate world hunger. We were prepping him to present his proposal for a multi-million-dollar plan that would eliminate world hunger for the majority of the citizens in the country in which he was working. While this incredible human being could tell me the latest developments on food science in 3 different languages, he struggled to stand on stage and introduce himself by name. A product of a system where what and why are given all the creed. What we sound like, the how of what we say has been relegated to the talent bin. People think, oh, well, she just has a naturally nice voice, or, well, he's just good at speaking. He has a pretty instrument. Objectively, this is inaccurate. Being a compelling communicator takes time, energy, and focus, but more than that, it takes knowing that your body is a simple machine, an instrument. Play it. You would never expect a professional athlete to go out on the pitch with her shoes tied together, and yet, how often do we see speakers slouching, collapsing their lungs, cutting off the source of their own power? How many of us have ever been to a conference where the speaker mumbled? You couldn't understand their words. Yeah. It's where they don't open their mouth. A guitar player would never stuff socks inside the body of the guitar before he goes on stage. And yet, this is exactly what we do when we allow the how of how we say things to become anemic, an afterthought. Through the use of time, energy, and focus, Joanne, the food scientist, was able to learn how to use his voice as an instrument for change. And I'm happy to report that he got the contract and work is underway. But if he hadn't taken the time to focus on his voice and how he sounded, hundreds of thousands of people would still be going hungry. What we sound like is crucially important. I want to play a little game with you to demonstrate this. And I'm going to sing a pattern, and I want you to finish it. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. Did you say 5? I'm just alone in here. Most people say 5. Okay, now I'm going to do another one. You ready? 1, 3, 5, 7. Could go anywhere. Could go to 6. Could go to 1. So you see, it's the space between the first and the second that gives us pause, that makes our brains search for an answer, a predictable harbor in which to anchor. But predictable is boring. It doesn't give us pause or make us yearn. Learning how to use our voices isn't just about projecting the voice and standing up straight or even learning how to breathe. It's about creating an interesting auditory landscape for our listeners. So how do we do that? I turned to physics to find answers for myself. In physics, there's this concept called sympathetic resonance, and it's a concept where it's a harmonic phenomenon where a formerly passive string or vibratory body responds to external vibrations to which it has harmonic likeness. That's a complicated way of saying that when one thing vibrates, another thing vibrates along with it. You've seen examples of this in your life. The windows rattling in the car when the subwoofer is turned up, or the water rippling in the wine glass when you run your finger around the edge. Over and over, history reminds us of the power of sound to make change. Perhaps one of the most dramatic instances of this is the now infamous demise of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, or as she was lovingly nicknamed, Galloping Gertie. a suspension bridge about an hour north of Seattle, built similarly to the George Washington Bridge in New York or the Golden Gate in San Francisco. On July 1st, 1940, it opened to traffic, but on November 7th, a mere 4 months later, the bridge collapsed into the water below, a necklace breaking beads of bolts and steel into the river. But what's interesting about this story is that the winds which blew the bridge down were actually not blowing that fast. Engineers were baffled. What happened? Well, one of the bridge's cables had slipped, causing the bridge, which had a tendency to bounce up and down anyway, to begin to twist. And because of this twisting, the resonant tide of air blowing across it made the bridge then begin to spiral, twist, and flutter. And it was that flutter which then became a self-induced harmonic vibration pattern which grew and grew and grew until the bridge's deck could no longer take the strain and it crumbled into the water below. Resonance is a powerful tool which we must begin to use. It's a powerful tool which we can all learn to master by harnessing the resonant tide of our own voices. Our bodies resonate whenever we hear anything because our ears are highly sensitive vibratory receptors. Sound travels through water 5 times faster than through air, and we are made up of 60% water. So who are you not to become the sound you wish to hear in the world? Nature shows us over and over again that sound is power. The lion's roar, the crash of a waterfall. But in your everyday life, why should you care? When you ask your partner to pass the potatoes, they pass the potatoes. So why try and increase your vocal power? 2 reasons. The first reason is for you. Over and over again, we see examples of vocal mastery giving people the edge to be successful, from opera singers to rap stars, auctioneers to CEOs. The best performers are also the easiest to understand, and they emit power. Most of my clients are people who are looking to level up in their industry, and they seek vocal training specifically because they know it's the edge they need. One of my favorite examples of this is a story from my own life. A few years ago, I was working at a school putting on an opera on the playground there, and we were all working outside when all of a sudden we heard gunshots. Terrifying, traumatic. But within 45 seconds, the students were safely inside the building because I used the power of my voice and my phone was in my hand calling 911. Having that capacity to command a situation and a space, even a particularly high-stakes one like this, gave me power. And we found out later that it was just old fireworks that went off in a building across the street. Thank goodness. Sound is power. The second reason you should care about your vocal power is for everybody else. Sound connects us in a unique way, and the physics of sound back this up. Sympathetic resonance is not just about one object vibrating and another vibrating along with it. In our lives, sympathetic resonance is about creating a resonant vibratory field with our voices that acts as an invisible but very real connector between us. One we can feel on a deep level, but one that's not mere romantic fodder for selling coffee table books. This is physics. We use our voices in our day-to-day now, maybe more than ever. Endless Zoom calls, voice memos back and forth, constantly trying to convey our messages. And it creates cacophony. We must become vocal scientists. So I ask of you this: can you use your voice to your advantage? Can you use your voice to try and make a difference in the world? Of course you can! Don't be a malpractitioner of sound. Be the instrument you were meant to be. No, be the instrument you already are. The full instrument, the body, the breath, the bellows, the resonance. Because if we are all in resonance, we create a more harmonious society. I want to leave you with the final poem from my show, Sympathetic Resonance. Sound is defined as a mechanical disturbance traveling through an elastic medium, a material that tends to return to its original condition after being deformed. We all return to ourselves. And we humans, elastic mediums made up of elastic mediums, will find lives and loves and homes, and perhaps the oscillations of our hearts beating in our chests will drum out a pattern we cannot turn away from. So be the sound you wish to hear in the world. Thank you.